Imagine a dark sky where heavy clouds whisper secrets of judgment. During the camp of Israel, a man named Korah walks with firm steps, but his heart burns with rebellion. He approaches Dathan and Abiram, his allies, and together they plot in silence against Moses and Aaron's leadership. "Why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" they cry, their words echoing in Numbers 16:3. The accusation is direct, and the restless crowd begins to murmur. Korah and his followers, 250 men of renown, rose against those God had chosen. Moses, with eyes full of intensity, hears the provocation and does not respond with words of defense. He falls face to the ground, a gesture of humility, and declares, "Tomorrow the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy." Numbers 16:5. Sparks of tension illuminate the camp, and the atmosphere is suspenseful. The promise of a divine test hangs like thunder about to break. Moses, still bowed, asks the rebels to bring their censers the next day so that God himself might choose who is worthy. As night falls, bringing deep darkness, whispers spread through the tents and preparations are made for the following day. Korah, determined, prepares his censer while a silent doubt tries to find space within his arrogance. So the horizon is painted with dark expectations, as the echo of Moses' summons still reverberates in the Israelites' hearts. But Korah and his allies' plans are about to collide with something far more significant than they could imagine. The entire camp watches the unfolding events with attentive eyes. Korah's rebellion is not just an attack on Moses' leadership, but a direct challenge to God's purpose. That morning, as the first rays of the sun pierced the horizon, the atmosphere was heavy. Moses, with resolve, confronts the rebels again and says, "Is it not enough for you, sons of Levi, that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord?" Numbers 16:9. He reminds them of the purpose God had given the Levites, a sacred calling now being scorned. Meanwhile, pride and defiance grew like shadows in Korah and his followers' hearts. They refused to see the privilege granted to them, preferring to fight for what was never meant to be theirs. God's clear and explicit purpose had been challenged, and now the moment's tension promised an unexpected and profound outcome. Meanwhile, pride and defiance grew like shadows in Korah and his followers' hearts. They refused to see the privilege granted to them, preferring to fight for what was never meant to be theirs. God's clear and explicit purpose had been challenged, and now the moment's tension promised an unexpected and profound outcome. How will God respond to such direct disobedience? Here the events begin to move toward the next pivotal moment. As the morning progresses and the rebels prepare, Moses, calm yet resolute, makes a bold decision. He proposes a test that men cannot contest, but will bring the verdict of the Most High. With a voice echoing through the crowd, Moses instructs, "Do this. Take censers, Korah, and all your company. Put fire in them and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One." Numbers 16:6-7. It was as if an invisible curtain had been drawn, separating the sacred from the profane, the appointed from the disobedient. At that moment, it was not merely a matter of human choice, but of divine will, soon to be revealed in its fullness. As Korah's followers prepared their censers, smoke rising and the aroma of incense filling the air, a mix of anticipation and tension hung over the camp. The silent congregation seemed to hold its breath, awaiting what the future would unveil. In the distance, Dathan and Abiram refused to heed Moses' call. "We will not come up," they sneered, as recorded in Numbers 16:12-14. Their words dripped with defiance, mocking Moses and accusing him of tyranny. Their rejection was not just of a man, but of God's plan. And so, amidst lit censers and open refusal, tension climaxes. The stage is set for a divine manifestation revealing the Lord's judgment. As the hours drag on, heavy with tension, Moses attempts to reason with Dathan and Abiram. He summons them, but their responses are laced with contempt and defiance. They declare scornfully, "Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness, that you must also make yourself a prince over us?" Numbers 16:13. Their shouts of discontent spread through the camp like sparks in dry brush, igniting murmurs and doubts among the people. At that moment, the shadows of rebellion expanded, threatening to engulf the entire congregation. Moses, his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation, does not hesitate. He returns to pray to the Lord, seeking guidance on how to handle a crisis not just against him, but against God's plan. At that moment, Moses receives clear instructions and tells the people, "Depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins." Numbers 16:26. The camp stirs as entire families distance themselves from the rebels. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram stand isolated, but their pride remains unshaken. Moses' words echo as a somber warning, yet the disobedient do not retreat. As the congregation watches from afar, the unthinkable begins to unfold. The atmosphere now carries a weight of unease and dread. What could be about to happen in their midst? No sooner had the congregation moved away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram than the scene began to shift. The air grew thick as though heaven itself were watching. Standing solemnly among the people, Moses declared, "Hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been my own accord. If these men die as all men die, or if the fate of all humanity visits them, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord." Numbers 16:28-30. Before Moses' words finished echoing, the earth beneath the rebels' feet began to tremble. The ground pulsed with a life of its own as cracks tore through the camp. Screams of panic erupted, and in a terrifying instant, the earth beneath the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram split open like a voracious jaw. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. Numbers 16:32. The scene was horrifying. The rebels' families and all they owned vanished in an instant, a monumental reminder that challenging divine authority carries relentless consequences. As silence gripped the camp, the awe etched on every Israelite's face was unmistakable. Yet this was only the prelude to an even greater manifestation of God's judgment, looming like a distant storm. The fire from heaven still had something to declare. As the terror of the earth swallowing the rebels faded, a solemn silence settled over the camp. But Moses knew God's judgment was not yet complete. He raised his voice again, urging the people to stay clear, for the Lord continued to reveal his holiness and wrath against rebellion. At that moment, the call to separation became imperative, as recorded in Numbers 16:26. "Depart from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins." The Israelites, terrified by what they had witnessed, cautiously stepped back. Every step was heavy with fear, for no one wished to share the dark fate of those who had defied the Lord. Though the earth had swallowed the rebels, their supporters remained, proud men who believed they could minister before God without being chosen. They prepared their censers, holding them with confidence, as if offering incense could validate their holiness. Like a storm breaking without warning, fire came from the Lord. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. Numbers 16:35. The blaze illuminated the camp, and the witnesses' cries rang out as the rebel leaders' bodies fell, consumed by God's judgment. The fire revealed divine choice, leaving a trail of unsettling questions and the start of a more profound lesson. The censers, sacred even in the wrong hands, became symbols of something far more significant. The story moves toward an even more mysterious significance as the physical signs of rebellion transform into eternal reminders. What meaning would these charred censers hold for the people of Israel? After the fire consumed the 250 rebellious men and the congregation remained in shock, God ordered the censers used by the rebels to be recovered. Yet they would not be discarded. Instead, the Lord instructed Moses to turn them into a sacred memorial. Tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, to take up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire far away. And let the censers of these men who sinned at the cost of their lives be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, for they offered them before the Lord, and they became holy. Thus they shall be a sign to the people of Israel. Numbers 16, 37-38. Imagine the scene. Eleazar approaches the site where the fire had consumed the rebels, stepping carefully as he gathers the censers still marked by flames and tragedy. These objects, misused in rebellion, would now be hammered into metal plates to overlay the altar, transforming rebellion into a permanent reminder for the people. The altar, overlaid with plates from the censers, became a sign to the congregation that only those God chose could minister before him. It was a visual reminder of obedience and reverence for God's holiness. But despite this clear manifestation of God's power, the congregation's heart still wrestled with murmurs and doubts. A growing tension lingered over the camp, and the consequences of this grumbling were about to unfold. The congregation's hearts remained divided despite the clear warning and the sacred sign of the censers turned altar plates. Memories of tragedy failed to silence the whispers of discontent echoing through the tents. The shadow of rebellion lingered even after Korah and his allies' terrible fate. The next day, murmurs intensified. The congregation united in confusion, and misunderstanding turned to Moses and Aaron with explosive accusations. "You have killed the people of the Lord." Numbers 16:41. These words, filled with rejection and distrust, struck Moses and Aaron like blows, even after all that had transpired. Hearing the people's complaints, the Lord manifested himself again. As recorded in Numbers 16:42, a glorious cloud covered the tabernacle. The divine presence was undeniable, and the camp's tension became almost tangible. Moses and Aaron once more approached the tabernacle entrance, seeking intercession and guidance from the Most High. Then came the divine warning, "Get away from the midst of this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." Numbers 16:45. The Lord's wrath was poised to strike, but Moses and Aaron did not falter. As God's chosen leaders, they did not retreat. Instead, they interceded for the people, standing as mediators in a moment of grave danger. But something was about to happen that would further underscore the importance of obedience and intercession. A plague began to spread through the camp, bringing many to death. Aaron, instructed by Moses, took his censer and rushed between the living and the dead, a gesture of urgency and compassion. The plague spread like an unrelenting shadow among the people. Men and women, young and old, fell weakened by divine wrath sweeping the camp. Collective murmurs turned to groans of pain and desperate pleas. Tension peaked, demanding swift action. Moses, recognizing the severity, urgently told Aaron, "Take your censer, put fire on it from the altar, lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation to make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun." Numbers 16:46. Moses' words were a call to action and intercession, a plea to preserve life amid chaos. Aaron ran through the camp with the censer, driven by compassion and sacred duty. He stood literally between the living and the dead, a powerful symbol of intercession and the priest's role as mediator before God. And Aaron took the censer, as Moses said, and ran into the midst of the assembly. Behold, the plague had begun among the people, and he put on the incense and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. Numbers 16, 47, 48. The image of Aaron holding the censer amid chaos remains vivid. His act marked a turning point, a physical and spiritual barrier halting the plague and sparing the survivors. Over 14,000 perished, Numbers 16:49. But Aaron's intercession, guided by God's instruction, brought mercy where judgment once reigned. The people, now marked by grief and awe, contemplated what had occurred. Aaron, breathless, returned to the tabernacle, the smoking censer in his hands a reminder of intercession's power and the vital need to obey God's purpose. Yet more lessons remained. What further actions would the Lord take to engrave this message on his people's hearts? Though the people had witnessed Aaron's intercession and the plague's halt, murmuring and disobedience proved stubborn seeds in their hearts. Even after these events, darker currents stirred within the congregation. What should have been an enduring lesson in obedience to God's purpose still faced resistance. Despite witnessing the earth swallow rebels, fire consumes leaders, and a plague halted, the people's hearts remained restless and divided. Yet God, in his wisdom and patience, prepared to reveal another divine manifestation that would solidify his chosen leadership and bring peace to the camp. The following events would end the spirit of rebellion and grumbling, pointing to an unmistakable and unquestionable path. Silence enveloped the camp after the plague's devastation. The people still felt the weight of loss, yet many hearts remained hardened. They still failed to grasp that God's choice to lead his people was indisputable. In his grace, God gave a definitive sign to erase doubt and confront lingering murmurs. Divine instruction came to Moses. Speak to the people of Israel and get from them staffs, one for each father's house, from all their chiefs according to their fathers' houses, 12 staffs. Write each man's name on his staff, and write Aaron's name on the staff of Levi, for there shall be one staff for the head of each father's house. Numbers 17:2-3. The staff were collected. Each was a simple, lifeless piece of wood representing the tribe's leaders. Moses placed them in the tabernacle before the Lord's presence. The instruction was explicit. The staff that sprouted would signal God's chosen. Imagine the anticipation gripping the camp. Murmurs spread as the people anxiously awaited God's verdict. Silence hung thick. When Moses entered the tabernacle the following day, he discovered something extraordinary. Aaron's staff, the simple wood representing Levi's house, had sprouted and produced buds, blossoms, and almonds. And on the next day, Moses went into the tent of the testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron for the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds and produced blossoms, and it bore ripe almonds. Numbers 17:8. It was an undeniable sign, a direct testimony to divine choice. God had spoken and the answer was clear. The people witnessing the miracle were stunned. Would this finally bring peace to the camp? This story still holds profound lessons as the people continue learning about God's holiness and the importance of obedience. Let us delve further into the developments following this extraordinary sign. After Aaron's staff, divinely manifested, sprouting blossoms and almonds as a clear sign of God's choice, the congregation finally began to grasp the gravity of rebellion and the holiness of God's purpose. Silence reigned as the people reflected on the magnitude of what had occurred. Yet God still had more to teach, something to cement the lessons learned. The survivors of these events were now witnesses to something greater than Moses and Aaron's leadership. They witnessed God's unassailable power, which not only appoints leaders, but preserves his perfect plan. The congregation needed to learn complete trust in divine authority and abandon all desire for disobedience or rebellion. The story of Korah and his followers was not merely about discipline or judgment. It was about showing Israel that God desires a relationship rooted in obedience and reverence. Through clear signs and even tragedies, God was shaping the nation's heart to follow his will and recognize his greater purpose for them. This story leads us to a profound reflection. How do we respond to God's leadership and purpose in our lives? Now, let us lift our hearts in prayer, connecting the themes of this powerful story to the struggles and lessons we face in our reality. Almighty Lord, through your word we learn. Do we continue to murmur and rebel, or do we seek to trust your plan, even when we do not fully understand? Now let us lift our hearts in prayer, connecting the themes of this powerful story to the struggles and lessons we face in our reality. Forgive us when, like Korah and his followers, we allow pride and defiance to take root in our hearts. Help us to recognize your leadership and respect those you place in authority, trusting your purpose even when the path seems uncertain. In a world often marked by division, teach us to be intercessors like Aaron, standing between the living and the dead, bringing reconciliation and peace. May we always remember that your will is perfect and true. Security is found in you alone. Amen. We conclude this narrative filled with suspense, lessons, and powerful displays of God's purpose. Share this message with others, so together we may grow in obedience, humility, and reverence for the Lord.